Alright, so are you ready for this? Into this video, I am debunking the Sony FX3. I'll share a video with you that one of our sources shared with us of the legit camera. And also, I'm gonna tell you the final features and specs of this camera. And you may actually be excited or you may actually be disappointed. Just want to warn you guys. And the other thing, the video is very short. Our source actually snapped a video with the phone, shared it with us. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and yes, we're gonna debunk the Sony FX3 once and for all. But before we continue, let me remind you about the giveaway that we have in the channel of this brand new Zhiyun Crane 2S. And simply all you have to do is read the rules right here. I'll be listing the rules also down in the description. Worldwide entries, and we're gonna be making the announcement on April 5th. Good luck to all of you guys. All right, so you're ready to hear about the Sony FX3 and finally tell you everything about the features? Okay, get ready guys, because you may be disappointed or excited like I mentioned before. So first of all, I want to share this little video with you guys, and disclaimer is short, but at least we got something right now to talk about and more information. Now, while you enjoy this little video playing back and forth, I want to tell you that the specs of these cameras are gonna sum up to a couple of words: Sony A7S3 in a different body. So this is exactly what we got from our source. They say, listen, you already have the Sony A7S III, this camera is exactly the same thing. Now, you may think that this makes sense or may not make sense, but I want to tell you why this makes a lot of sense in just a moment. Now, first of all, if this camera is just like the Sony A7S III, we are talking about a full frame sensor, 12 megapixel, backside illuminated, and it's not going to be a Super 35 sensor like some people were saying, in my past videos, or APS-C. Now, the other thing is that if this camera is exactly the same thing as the Sony A7S III with the same features, then I was kind of like dead right when I mentioned that the camera has a shutter release and it may have still capabilities. So that's another thing that is going to be confirmed, that this camera is going to have still capabilities. Now, I pressed my source to tell me, hey, tell me if the camera is going to have still capabilities. I just want to know that. The answer I got was like, I just told you. It's exactly the same thing as the Sony A7S III, and this is the only thing that I'm allowed to say to you. So I take it, right? So the camera is gonna have still capabilities then if it is just like the Sony A7S III, and it makes a lot of sense, and I'm gonna tell you why in just a moment. Also, we're not gonna have the NDs that a lot of people were wanting, including myself, but instead we're gonna have the IBIS and the image stabilization, the digital IBIS that the camera, the Sony A7S III also has. So this is pretty much, the essence of this camera. 12 megapixel, full frame, still capabilities. The camera is gonna have the same specs as the Sony A7S III, so we should expect the same codecs, 4K up to 120 frames per second. And no, we're not gonna have 8K. That was actually confirmed once again. And you may ask to yourself, so why this camera, right? Why we need another camera that is exactly like the Sony A7S III, and what about the pricing? Well, let me tell you my reasoning about why this camera exists and why Sony decided to create this camera almost identical like the Sony A7S III. Number one thing is that Sony is entering the drone market with the AirPeak. And while the Sony A7S III is a compact camera, having a cleaner camera that actually declutters the body, from everything that you can actually remove is going to be a positive move when actually mounting a camera in a gimbal. So Sony went with this design just to lighten up the body and give more way for lenses, for example, in this situation. Now, the other thing why this cinema camera, because remember, now none of the cinema cameras from Sony actually have still capabilities. I believe that none of them, at least not the FX6 or FX9. But this one makes a lot of sense because this one is a camera designed for drones. So, if you're a realtor that takes a lot of pictures, or, you do real estate work, probably you would skip a camera that cannot take pictures to be flown in a drone. So because of that reason, Sony decided to add the still capabilities in this camera, and I think that is actually brilliant. You're gonna have a cinema camera, but at the same time, it's going to have, still capabilities. Kind of like a flip world of what's going on with the Sony A7S III. That camera is actually a still camera first, believe it or not, because it's the same body of all the still cameras that Sony have produced, but it has, great video capabilities. In this case, it seems to be kind of like the opposite. the camera is much more rigged or much more constructed, you know, like a cinema camera with still capabilities. Now, the other thing is that if you are someone that actually uses the camera a lot in gimbals, to be honest with you, you know, better off to have a camera declutter, or at least that's the way I prefer my cameras. And one of the reasons why I've been using a lot the Sony A7C, because it's super compact, and before that, you know, my APS-C Sony camera. So this camera actually, once again, makes a lot of sense for those that want to fly a camera in smaller gimbals, you know, not having to, you know, buy the more expensive gimbals, or, you know, log more weight, you know, bearing, you know, a heavier gimbal. So again, in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense. And one thing that is actually remaining of a question is going to be, so what is specifically the price of this camera going to be? Because remember, in Europe, it's being rumored that the camera is going to cost 3,795 euros, which it actually translates to $4,600. But we also know that in Europe, you know, cameras are usually more expensive because they have higher taxes than the USA. So chances are that this camera may be a $4,000 camera, you know, $500 more than the Sony A7S3. And you're probably also gonna ask to yourself, so why do I have to pay more money for a camera that doesn't have an EVF? Because remember, this camera is not going to have the EVF. Well, I think the answer is just because this camera is geared more towards, you know, cinema, and just for the simple fact, you know, cinema cameras are more expensive. But there may be something else that I don't know yet. You know, it wasn't shared to me that this camera may make a lot of sense for those cinematographers other than the Sony A7S3. One of the things that I'm thinking is that probably instead of having HDMI, we're gonna have SDI out, you know, and that is going to be something that a lot of people are gonna prefer over HDMI. And the other thing is that, you know, the hot shoe mount may do some specific things, or maybe some accessories like the one that we shared in our last video, that, you know, you can connect the top handle, and at the end you can connect the XLR module. Now, I don't know if the camera is gonna come by default, you know, in all units with the top handle and the XLR module. What I think is gonna happen is that Sony is going to be giving the opportunity to people to buy the body only, and there's gonna be a combo with the top handle and the XLR module. Now, the XLR module that I showed you guys in the last video already exists, and it's the one that I'm using to record with this microphone right here. So a lot of people already have that, so I'm sure that Sony is gonna do that, you know, camera only and, you know, XLR module, or top handle and XLR module. So this is it, guys. So the Sony FX3 is actually reboxed Sony A7S3 with minor details. The other thing that I've been told is that the camera is going to have fans, so that's going to be a difference over the Sony A7S3, and I'm assuming that this is going to allow the camera maybe to something extra than the Sony A7S3. Otherwise, I don't know why they would put a fan if it's actually exactly the same, but it is what it is. So guys, what do you think about the Sony FX3 basically being a Sony A7S3 reboxed in a much, you know, cleaner body, minus the EVF, and probably more expensive? Does it make sense? Let me know in the comments down below. We'd love to know your input. And as always, guys, subscribe to this channel for more content like this one. Rest assured that I'm gonna be bringing you more leaks. Until then, see you on the next video.